Okay, so now we're down to our last video for this review. This is problem 22 on the review, and on the review it refers you to the book, but I went ahead and tried to recreate. I think this might be problem A, and this is problem C. I can't quite recall, but these should look like some out of your book. Hopefully you can see this. I may try and highlight right up here on the y-axis, that's 5. This is -5. This point here is pi, and this point here is 2 pi. So basically I want us to look at this graph and figure out the amplitude, the period, the phase shift. And I believe for these problems, these are all going to be sine waves, so figure out the equation for this graph as a sine wave. So the period, or the amplitude, let's start with the amplitude, that's always pretty easy. The amplitude is from the middle of the graph, how high does it go, how low does it go? It looks like it goes from -5 to 5. So obviously the amplitude is 5, and that's going to be A when I get ready to figure out my equation. The period, so when does the cycle begin repeating? Easiest thing to do is to start at 0 on your x-axis, and as you follow the wave, track this thing until you begin to repeat the same cycle. So here it's going down. Oops, I made a mistake. Even though my graphs are 5 and -5, you notice here it only goes to 4. Whoops. All right, amplitude's 4. Now the period. So I start going down. I go to my minimum point, -4, comes back up. So even though I go through 0, I've only completed half the cycle. Because here, when it goes to 0 here, it's coming from above and going down. Here I'm going up. So now I keep going, I peak out. Now as I come back down, now as I go through 2 pi, I've now finished the cycle. So actually, from 0 to this point is my period, and that point right there is 2 pi. So the period is 2 pi. Now in our little equation, we said the period is 2 pi over b. We do a little math here. We quickly see that therefore b is going to be 1. We need the value of b to eventually plug into our equation. Now we need to see if there's a phase shift. Well, let's think about what a normal sine wave looks like. A normal sine wave, let me try and draw it down here. A normal sine wave starts at 0. The value of the sine wave is 0. So normally it's here, and then it goes up and comes down and finishes like this. But you see, we don't have that here, because here it goes down and then up. It's almost like if I were to take this graph and shift it over this much, then I would start here and go up and come down, and that would be normal. So it looks like my phase shift is pi, but I think in instructions in this problem, I didn't have the book with me. They asked that you make C, I think, to be a a positive number. So basically, I'm going to say the phase shift is going to be pi. So now I can say y is equal to, well, in the phase shift, actually, it's a little tricky, but I need to call the phase shift negative pi because the phase shift is negative c over b, and since b is 1, then negative pi equals negative c, c equals pi. So therefore my equation is going to be y equals 4 sine b is 1, so it's just x plus pi. Now this next one looks interesting. Now the one thing I noticed right away, if I look at this one, you notice on my x-axis, my sort of tick marks are like pi and 2 pi. But when I go down here, they're not values of pi, it's just like 0 and 2 and negative 2. All right, that's going to affect my equation, makes it a little trickier. So let's just do the obvious thing. So once again, my equation should be in this form. Now the amplitude, if you can tell, this is 2 right here, and this is negative 2. So it looks like the amplitude is going to be 3. So A is 3. Let's figure out the period. So if I go to when x is 0, it starts here at the top, goes down, comes back up, and it finishes right here. If you can't see very well, this is labeled 2, this is labeled 0, and this is minus 2. So actually, to complete one cycle, I go this distance, which looks like it's 1. Now it's not pi, it's just the number 1. I know the period equals 2 pi over b. So it turns out it looks like b equals 2 pi. Now the phase shift, this actually looks like a cosine wave. Because at the start, when x is 0, it's at the top. So this thing actually, this thing, if I were to move this thing over just this amount, then it would be like a sine wave. And what is that amount? It looks like it's probably like a half. Because negative 1's right here. If I shifted it a half to the right, so let's call my phase shift. Now the negatives and positives are tricky. I think I want to call it a negative 1/2. We'll see if that makes sense. Phase shift is negative c over b. B is 2 pi. So if I solve for c, I believe it's going to be pi. Except I'm not sure about this phase shift. I'm a little worried that, let me make sure, Although actually, this is not negative 1 here. I think negative 1 is right here. So this here, I think is like 1/4. Sorry. These problems can be sort of confusing. So I think it's going to end up being pi over 2. So now, if I write out my equation, A is 3 sine, B is 2 pi, plus C, which is pi over 2. All right, bottom line is, sometimes figuring out these graphs are not too hard, but the phase shift is what can make it a little crazy. All right, so that wraps up. I've worked through pretty much all the problems on this test for you. Hopefully these will help you get ready for the test.